Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of Navigating NewSpace, produced by the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program. My name is Shayna Hume. I'm a 2018 Fellow of the program and also the host for this segment, where we interview fellows, executives from host companies, and other affiliates of the program to help teach you what our goals for commercial space and the future of ethical leadership in the space industry are. Today, I am so excited for the reloading purposes. So going back a moment, I'm not sure where I cut out. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming 2020 Fellow Cadence Payne. Cadence is a fourth-year PhD student at MIT in the STAR Lab in AeroAstro, and we are going to get to talk all about her experience in the fellowship and beyond. Cadence, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, Shayna.
It's so good to see you. We actually met during my Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship back in 2018 when we were both interning at the Aerospace Corporation, and I was so happy to see you join the program this past year.
Oh, it was great. It was great to see people that I actually knew, like in the program.
Yeah.
Also, like getting to talk to you about your experience, like while we were both at Aerospace, was also like incredibly helpful. So.
Definitely. On that note, I think most of the fellows would agree being able to ask questions to past fellows to understand what the program is all about. It really helps making the decision whether or not to apply, I would think.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. So before we get started, I'll just make that note. For any prospective applicants that are watching, applications have been open. They are still open. Many applications, because, of the influx of engineers in the program, come in right at the last minute. So you are not too late. Reach out to us, ask any questions you have, get in touch with us through social media, and we would be so glad to talk to you and help you in your application process.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we're all super friendly that way. None of us fight.
No.
Okay. So to kick us off, would you tell me a little bit about your journey and what brought you into aerospace and then what brought you to the program along the way?
Sure. I will try to be concise. My journey was very strange, to be honest. So I'm from a very small town in Kentucky called Eminence. I think like population size maybe like 2,400. If you wanna like base your metrics on that. They like recently got a McDonald's like maybe 5 years ago, so it's like that kind of small. So I went to high school there, and I didn't really know much about baseball. My dad and my mom were kind of talking to me about the subject that I was going to study at the summer program called GSP. It's a government scholars program that's like a pre-college thing, like between their junior and senior year of high school, kind of go to quote unquote college for 5 weeks out of the summer, and they kind of study a topic that they can just briefly get introduced to. So I at the time actually wanted to be a photographer. So I wanted to be a photographer and have my own photography business. I was super into like taking pictures of everything and people and all sorts of kind of things. And then my stepdad was actually like, well, why don't you like explore other topics, just for fun. And he told me about an astronomy class that he had in college that he really enjoyed. So I was like, okay, what the heck? Like, I'll go out on a limb here and like, change the subject and see if I enjoy it. And I ended up having an excellent advisor for my class, Rico Tyler, who I believe is still a professor at Western Kentucky University. He did an excellent job of like introducing the subject in a way that was like really fun. I even got to like build my own telescope, which I still have in my apartment, and I like use that as a fun fact for like all these icebreakers that we have to do via Zoom. So it's like pretty cool. So that kind of introduced me to the world of astronomy and space. Kind of like everyone's origin story, I was always like fascinated with the universe. Kentucky has really beautiful, clear skies at night. So I get to like, lay around in the grass and just kind of like stare up at it. But I never really knew what was going on. And then I guess it never like occurred to me that I could actually study that for a career until I went to this program. So, I got introduced to astronomy. Then I went back to high school my senior year and I like fell in love with the subject of psychology. So I wanted to like, go to school for psychology so that I could help people and like help the world, become a better place. I was always like that kid that just like wanted to help folks. So I went to college at Morehead State University. And I studied psychology for a semester, but I also, they have an excellent space science program there. So I was kind of using that as like a fallback. I was like, okay, well, if the psychology thing doesn't work out, then like, I know that they have a space program and I know that that's something that I might be interested in doing for a career. So it turns out that the psychology thing did not work out. And I like very hesitantly changed my major one day, my sophomore year to space science and with a minor in astronomy. At Morehead State University, which is also in Kentucky. So I studied space science there. My focus was on atomic frequency standards. So I worked with, which is basically like a fancy word for an atomic clock. So a really precise clock, they use to plan. So Morehead is like really cool. It's like a hidden gem, honestly. Yeah. Located literally in the boonies, like in the middle of the Danube National Forest. But they have really cool it's a 2-meter radio telescope that sits up on top of our hill and it kind of overlooks campus. It's really beautiful. Students are actually able to get trained to operate the dish there in-house on campus, which is like super rad. Like you really don't get those opportunities to like do stuff like that at other institutions. I forgot where I was going with that. But like, yeah, Morehead's cool. So
shout out to Morehead for being fantastic. Everyone I know who has left Morehead has loved it.
Oh my gosh, Morehead is incredible. Like I will hype it every single chance that I get. But yeah, so my research when I was an undergrad focused on that standard that like disciplines the big dish that's on our hill. But I also actually dabbled in astrophysics a little bit. So I studied spectral analysis for supernova remnants. So just kind of looking at the explosions of dead stars, like when they exploded, why they exploded, what kind of star they were, like what the star was made of. That was like my research. That was my bread and butter. I loved astrophysics. I still love astrophysics. But now I'm not.
Quick question on astrophysics. I just want to, for anyone who might not be familiar with the area, since we cover such a large spectrum, when you say looking at the remnants of dead stars, what kind of remnants are there?
Yeah. So when I say remnants, basically what I mean is like, okay, how do I explain this? So you have a star, right? The star, there are multiple ways for the star to die, if you want to say. So at the end of the life, the star does multiple things depending on its size, depending on, what it's made of. There are so many different like characteristics that kind of drive the end result for a star's lifetime. And I'm pretty rusty. I haven't studied on quite some time, so I'm sure like if people are like on the line that actually do this for a living, they're going to yell at me. But anyways, so multiple ways. And I actually studied a star that died because it was so massive that it kind of first like balloons out into a red supergiant. So it kind of like sheds its outer layers and expands really rapidly to something that's really large. And then it kind of implodes on itself and then explodes. It like there's a whole process of like, coming in, blowing out. And then when it goes out, it actually sends a shock wave that propagates through the space-time continuum, through the universe. And that shock wave like sweeps up material as it goes. Materials actually see forming really beautiful like bubbles that look like, they look like bubbles when you like Google like supernova remnants in the sky. And it has like a single point at the middle, which is like the remnant of once was that. That's not sure what a supernova remnant is. And you can actually like the really cool thing about the universe.
So cool.
It's so cool. Like, yeah,
really like cool. I hate to smile at something dying in the universe. These stars were beautiful things, but this is so cool. Like them dying is beautiful and amazing.
Sorry, I'm just like, yeah, dead star is like so cool. But it's like it's kind of morbid, like when you think about it a little bit. But yeah, so the cool thing about the universe is that every element kind of has a thumbprint. So when you look at the star, basically you're like pointing an instrument at it and looking at the thing off of it. Every element has its own like energy signature. So it has its own thumbprint that you can send data that identifies that element. So it's really cool. Spectral analysis is so dope. And by looking at that, you're able to get so many different answers about what the star once was, what it was doing, who it was hanging out with, like all these different things about its like past life, if you want to call it that. Also, I think you froze. Am I frozen?
Yeah, one of
There
us
we
is
are.
frozen. We're coming back.
Nice. Yeah, so I studied that. That was a really long story. I meant to be concise. Yeah, so now I'm at MIT, and the STAR Lab, which is the Space Telecommunications, Astronomy and Radiation Lab under Dr. Carrie Cahoy. And I primarily work on CubeSats. So CubeSats are small spacecraft that are like, I don't know where my hand is, but they're like about the size of a loaf of bread. Yeah, so they're like pretty small little guys, compared to like the big giant billion-dollar birds that you see. Birds are spacecraft. I'm sorry that I use that language. But yeah, so like they're really cool because they're compact little like loaves of bread that you launch into space. You like yeet them into space off rockets. And basically we like hitchhike rides because we're like, we can't really like afford a rocket to ourselves. We're literally like this big. So we hitchhike rides and they just kind of like throw us wherever they're able to throw us. And we're able to do some like really groundbreaking, like breaking big science with like really small packages. So CubeSats are like so rad. I could talk about them all day.
Yeah, they're one of the coolest industry disruptors we've had. They can do such amazing things. Actually, some high schools even send them up now, and I missed it by a little bit. But right after I graduated high school, my high school started working and sent one up, and that was the coolest and saddest moment for a moment when I realized it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you get into CubeSats? How did you transition from that space sciences and astrophysics end of it into this more commercial topic?
Yeah, so Morehead is actually like on top of it comes CubeSat technology and building CubeSat technology. So I actually worked with Dr. Ben Malfris, who just released a book. Actually, I think like earlier or like mid last week, maybe like like one or something. It's just like a really cool book. So Morehead has a very strong CubeSat program. One of my first professors at Morehead was actually Professor Bob Twiggs, who is the co-founder, co-creator of the CubeSat form factor with Jordy, who was at Stanford, which was like wild. I didn't know.
It's insane.
Yeah, and he was just like my professor, and he was like so chill and like, you know, quirky. And then like I went to a conference with him, and he was so famous, and I'm like, who are you? Like he never told us. So I'm like, it was wild.
Celebrity in disguise.
I'm like, you could have told us. Yeah, he just kept that information to himself. But yeah, so I've always like been around CubeSat. Dabbled a little bit more. I wish I would have done more work on them. But I knew that like that was something that I wanted to do. So I went to grad school to actually join a lab to continue doing that. For, you know, sometimes for astrophysics or like atmospheric work. So it's like similar.
Oh, that is so cool. Side question from something at the beginning of your story. There were so many interesting parts of that. I wanted to ask you a million. You were interested in photography and then you built your own telescope. Have you ever ventured into astrophotography?
Okay, so I'm trying. I'm currently very trash at it. Like, my camera's a little old. I need to, there are several things I need to learn. Like, I think the basics, like you need to focus on something, you got a long exposure, and you should multiple and like layer somehow. I'm not quite there yet, but we're working on it. It's like, honestly,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of my quarantine goals. So.
I can't wait to see your work someday. I bet it'll be beautiful, you know, especially judging by how long quarantine might go on.
Wait, I have so much time.
Yeah, you have tons of time. Life isn't changing.
Yeah, I'm like recently like dabbling in Photoshop again, so hopefully I can like pick up a few things that'll help me like make better pictures.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
So you came to MIT to do CubeSats. What is your PhD in now there? And you're a few years away from getting that?
Yeah, theoretically. Yeah, I mean, PhDs are like uncertain at all times. Yeah, so
I'm aware.
Yeah. My master's work was actually for a CubeSat called AERO. It's the Auroral Emission Radio Observer, and it's paired with a sister spacecraft called Vista, which is the vector interferometry sensor technology, space technology using AERO. I think I always butcher that acronym. I'm so sorry if my team is listening. But yeah, so it's a pair of CubeSats that actually deploy. They're 6U, so they're about like, if you think about like a loaf of bread, they're like two of those stacked on top of each other. So they're sister CubeSats, meaning that they're like built identically. They're like carbon copies of one another. They deploy at the same time. And then once their solar panels are deployed, they actually use atmospheric drag to separate themselves on orbit. And then once, they're at a comfy space and we're happy with, how much progress they've made, hopefully, we deploy like a really long floppy antenna that's to low frequency emission from the Aurora Borealis. So the northern and southern lights is kind of the region that we're probing. And it's really cool because it like gives us information about like the atmosphere and the magnetosphere and how like our Earth system kind of interacts with the sun, who's always like constantly spewing nasty particles at us. So my master's work was actually for that project specifically. So basically, like nobody has really deployed a vector sensor of this type in space before, so our measurements are really novel. The data is going to be really exciting, really new. So we had an auxiliary sensors package on board that's mainly like a suite of different sensors. Like we have cameras and magnetometers. It's all run by like a Raspberry Pi. So it's like mostly like commercial off the shelf, like pretty cheap, robust components. And we did have optical sensors on there that were different from the camera. So my master's thesis was like making sure that we could use those like really robust, cheap optical sensors to actually sense the aurora in the way that we wanted to. That was kind of like a yes or no, like is the aurora there or is it not there when we're taking measurements with like our new antenna. So my master's work was actually just like a sensitivity analysis on that instrument. However, I like proved that like we weren't able to do that with that instrument, so I'm shifting gears for my PhD.
The best kind of science, the science that cancels your own degree.
Honestly, science is painful. If anybody told you otherwise, they're lying.
Yeah. Anyone who thinks that science is boring and textbook and, defined hundreds of years ago, no, it is like, I don't know, it's an impact sport, I have to say.
It's like high risk, high reward, hopefully. Like CubeSats is like pretty brutal because they will hurt your feelings with no remorse. Yeah, but I think I'm still working on locking in my PhD topic as I'm like transitioning from master's to PhD. But I think my topic is going to be on another CubeSat mission that's actually using what's called a spectrometer. So it's like an instrument that's like looking at the spectra like I described earlier for the Supernova Remnants, but we're actually taking a similar instrument with more bands and pointing it down at the ocean to study different characteristics of the ocean for climate science.
Cool. That is awesome. I love space applications to help the Earth.
Me too. Yeah.
Nice.
It's very rewarding. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your experience with the fellowship. You were a 2020 fellow, so you are one of our hopefully unique COVID fellows in that you probably did everything for the fellowship online, right?
That is correct, including my internship. I worked with Millennium Space Systems, who is they're a small they're a small space company in Los Angeles, right across from the Aerospace Corporation, actually, which is Matthew Isakowitz is the CEO and president. So I worked with Millennium. I mentioned that they were a small company because they were actually recently acquired by Boeing in August 2018, I think. I could be wrong.
Yes, it was immediately after the summit for my fellowship, right after we toured them.
I remember it was like a huge thing. We were like, what? So that was really cool. I personally like loved my experience with that company because they value company culture like so much, like more, I guess like, I don't know. Aerospace also does like an excellent job at company culture, but I think like Millennium is able to do it like in a way that seems very intimate, where they like, because they're such a small company still. They try
organization within the big.
So they're trying to maintain that tiny company, like almost like a startup-y vibe. So you get like that really intimate like check-in with people who like are, maybe like have like 30 plus years of experience on you. Which like, I've also interned at the Aerospace Corporation. They also do an excellent job, but they're such a big company compared to Millennium. Like Aerospace is not that giant, like, compared to some of the other industry giants, but still it just like felt like you were in like a really intimate environment.
Aerospace is by no means a startup environment. There's kind of the difference in the new space industry, whether you're established or you're startup, and startups just have a unique kind of flexibility.
Yeah, no, that's true. Even though the company was acquired, they're still
Yeah.
trying to really like hold on to that ability to be flexible.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I can vouch they're doing an excellent job.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a really fun company. I wasn't there in person, but apparently they like had Nerf gun wars and stuff. Like it was a super chill environment. My mentor was especially incredibly supportive, very understanding with like all the things that are going on, and like my ability to like not work and like produce as much like many results, I guess, from like working from home. That was something that I was like really concerned about, because like internships usually like go super hard and you're like, okay, I have to like prove myself to like this company. So like, that was one thing that I was like really cognizant of like moving forward, and just like having those open conversations with them. Yeah, the company was incredible. All of our summit was also online.
Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, so the summit is usually like a 2-day like what is the word, like jamboree.
Yes. Jamboree is the perfect word for it. It's just shenanigans and space celebrity and lots of nerdiness all compacted.
Super nerdy, like yeah. So that's the traditional look, like in the before times, before COVID and like ruined everybody's life. Yeah, no, we were actually able to maintain our summit fully online, where we had almost weekly or bi-weekly meetings, very like high frequency meetings with different people like all across the industry. So like you were just like sitting in your home and like you would pull up your video like wherever you were from, and like some like really person would like pop onto your screen and like tell you about their experience like just with the class of fellows. So it was like really like intimate like space where you felt like you could be like vulnerable and ask like really cool questions to these people who are like industry giants. So it was really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. I heard that it was a really great experience in that, it was spread out, because 2 days of all online activities, as has been proven, isn't a lot of fun. I think the way they spread it out gave you guys the best of everything. You could think of good questions and then relax and recover and keep going back at it. Yeah,
it was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So has it been in your life since then? I know you're on with us today, which, I appreciate so much, but what is the experience of being an alumni of the program like now that you're through the main fellowship?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like super connected to all of the fellows. We're all like on social media now. We have like our sub channel that we talk to each other in and like post memes and like space updates and stuff. It's really cool. Like honestly, whenever you join the program, you're kind of like joining this family, both the Isakowitz family as well as like the MIFP fam, if you want to like consider us that. It's just like, I can't remember who said it, but it was just like, it's just like this beautiful conglomeration of like folks who are really passionate about this one thing. And like, it's a nice way to like hone in on your passion in a way like where you can be honest, where you can be vulnerable, where you can ask questions to people who are probably experienced in it. Like we have such a diverse in regards to like, career oriented and like, mindsets and like, directions of, where people are going in life. We have such a diverse group of people on that front that like anything that you could be concerned with or like curious about, like you can just plop that in our chat and like I'm sure somebody has something to say. So it's,
I think yeah,
it's like so cool. Like I don't know, it does feel like a little fam. Like we're just like riders, Like, we have like our squad, like our space squad. It feels really cool.
Space squad, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So yeah, my experience here has been much the same. We're all just kind of like chatting with each other, like sharing space with each other. I don't know, it's been incredibly enjoyable, and I don't see that thing up. It's like a lifetime ordeal. Yeah. Which I'm like excited.
Locked in for life, and you didn't even know it. You thought it was just an application.
Right. You really think, huh? It's just a great.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How, since you're at this turning point, you're looking forward to your PhD, you're trying to decide what research to go with next, and PhDs are always tenuous, but in just a few years, you are going to be looking at an entire career in this awesome, exciting, kind of wacky and crazy industry. How did the fellowship feature in this turning moment for you, and how did it help you pivot into what you want to do next?
Yeah, so what I want to do next is a very very fuzzy question, right? Like does anybody
Who I
really
want to be when I grow up?
yeah, really, do we ever really know what we want to do? Like, it's like a relative question, right? Like the fellowship definitely, I sought out this fellowship specifically because I am like incredibly interested in this industry, especially commercial aerospace is like super fast paced, sometimes like really aggressive schedules, trying to do like incredibly innovative things, and I just kind of wanted to taste that environment. Because like, I'm used to MIT. MIT is very similar. It's very fast paced, very high demanding. Like they expect high output. Most of the time there are like, obviously now people are like pretty lenient, because there's a whole pandemic, like, but like,
Really? Wow.
it's like news. I think it was on the news yesterday. But but yeah, so like I don't know, I'm interested in this environment. I feel like the commercial industry really does allow you flexibility to kind of push the boundary. Like, if you want to use it, be disruptive. Like it's an incredibly disruptive environment where like you can do really rad things super quickly as long as you have the support, right, and the money. Like that's a whole thing. Yeah, so I really wanted to get that experience, and this fellowship like provided it spot on. Like everything that I wanted to get out of it, in regards to like shaping my perspective of what I could possibly do for my career trajectory, like was satisfied by this program. I'm like really cool. Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'll stay in commercial space after the PhD?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's looking like it. We'll see.
A PhD ending, I guess that's a bold thing to say, right, that you think it'll end ever.
Thinking about life beyond the PhD. Get back to me in like 2 to 3 years.
I need to stop making jokes about PhDs on this segment. Everyone's going to think that I'm being tortured in my degree.
No, PhD is, it ebbs and flows. But
that's a great way of putting it. So yeah, let's talk more about commercial space. We're all here because we care about commercial space and we find it interesting. It is exciting and really disruptive. It is so interesting that a word like disruptive can be such a positive thing, right, where that kind of, sudden breaking and coming back together actually signals incredible innovation being done at a fast pace.
Right.
What challenges, or maybe either way, take it positive or negative, what things are you really excited to see in commercial space? What technologies do you think will be disruptive or transformative to the whole world? And then what challenges do you also see coming up as this little baby industry becomes a teenager?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm going to try to tread carefully. Yeah, so I actually wrote about this in my application. So like the whole thing, like the whole, debacle between like moon to Mars, moon or Mars, like which one are we going to go with? That's like, I actually really like, I love the moon. I do love the moon. I think that it's necessary that we go there first, but obviously like the thought of going to Mars, engineering associated with that are so exciting. They give you like this really weird space to work in where you can be as innovative and as creative and as wild as you want to be. Like, for example, landing rovers on Mars using a sky crane. Like, what? That's so wild. Like, honestly, somebody like in sci-fi movies like Sky Crane, this like baby rocket helicopter thing that like drops a whole rover onto the surface of Mars and then leaves. Like, that is wild, but it like exists and happened and was successful. And like, just thinking about things like that could happen in this industry at a very rapid pace. I'm just kind of like pushing forward. Like people are like Elon Musk, for example, are setting like very aggressive goals. And the fact that like, even if we don't meet them exactly, the amount of innovation that happens in that short time period is just so substantial compared to, other chunks of the history of the space industry. So I'm like really stoked to see just how we move forward. And I know that the innovation is going to be exponential moving forward with time. And I'm just like super, super excited to do that. But in my application, I wrote about things like, the kind of like the side effects of doing these like really rapid, really like difficult developments for different objectives. So for example, like going to Mars, one thing that we really need to consider is like radiation shielding for astronauts. it doesn't do them any good if they get there and then they're really sick because they have radiation poisoning, right? They're not going to be able to do anything, or they're not going to be able to like complete the objectives. We also want to get them there and then bring them home safely, right? That should be a huge objective. So thinking about like shielding them from radiation, also like the sustainability of like food. Like if we wanted to grow food on Mars, like how are we going to do that in a sustainable and innovative way? Because Mars is such an extreme environment, that innovation could also influence and inspire innovations on the surface of the planet for people who maybe live in areas that have extreme environments, they have food insecurities, things like that. So one of the things that I really dig about space is that we can take these skills, these perspectives, all of these like innovative technologies that we're developing and turn them down, right? Down to our planet, down to our communities, especially the communities who are traditionally underrepresented, underserved, underinformed, all of that. We can use like the power that comes in this rapid, like really, really powerful innovation to actually help us out on the planet while doing these really, really cool things in space. So that's one thing that I think the commercial industry is just going to blow the top off of that goal. Granted, that is to be like a side objective, right? We need to also thinking of like we're really to like learn these really things about the Earth, how we then turn that knowledge into helping us, one, like protect our planet, and two, like protect the people of our planet and like help to improve the life here on the surface. And I think the commercial industry is gonna have a very strong role in that. So I'm stoked, honestly. I hope that it yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, all the fingers crossed, all the toes too.
Yeah.
So in this disruptive industry, and I would say, you know, I don't have the numbers on this, but anecdotally, from having worked and visited many of these companies, commercial space is a fairly young endeavor to begin with. There are some excellent mentors and people from the established space industry who really kicked it off, but many of the people who are making the advancements are not too much further along than you and I. So what role will the next generation of people graduating and moving into this industry, what impact will it have on the future of commercial space? Yeah,
I think people are really undercrediting the amount of work and thought and creative perspective that they're going to contribute to this field. Especially people who are like graduating now, who are like really excited to go out and start working. They're going to make the impact. They're like hitting the ground running, getting in like the weeds of the details of how we're going to move this industry forward like immediately. And because they're coming out with like fresh perspectives, you know, like they're newly informed from all their coursework, they're also really excited, and they've like, you know, if they're keeping up new cool innovative thoughts to like, you know, maybe rework some of the old things that like the industry has been doing. And I don't know, our generation is just so cool. And the fact that like I don't know, people complain that we complain too much. That's debatable.
I think we complain the right amount. When there's a problem, you should deal with it.
Exactly. I think that we complain the right amount, because we're like, okay, well then why have you all been doing this for like tens of years when it doesn't work as efficiently as it could? And like our generation is like, what's up with that? And everybody's like, I don't know. You know, it's just it's not broke, then why fix it? But like there's so many opportunities.
I was just thinking of that. That it used to be such a common phrase, and I don't know anyone my age who agrees with it.
Right. It's just like, okay, well, if it's working fine, then great, but it could also work a little better. Like, you know, if we just
or just like, why don't we like hit it against something and see what it does?
Yeah, like I don't know. I just don't think our generation is afraid of change in the way that some of the older generations might be. You know, because I mean, it makes sense. If you're settled, if you're comfortable, you don't want to push the bounds because change feels weird, right? Change is uncomfortable by default. But I think our generation, just because we're like, I don't want to say that we're more resilient, because that's highly offensive. But we're just like, you know, more willing to fail, maybe. If you want to put it
and we have different prices on failure. You know, our risk profile is totally different. It's not just in a psychology of a generation, but it's in the type of the industry. Dealing with commercial space, many of these companies are not dealing with astronauts. Many of them are dealing with robotic exploration. And because they are commercial and funded by different types of money, than NASA and other organizations of the past. You know, they can increase their risk profile and let it pay off without the same detriments.
Yeah, yeah. That's another, I'm going to plug CubeSats again because that's my life. But that's another really cool thing about CubeSats because, like, relatively speaking, they're pretty cheap to build, right? Like, compared to, again, like the $1 billion satellites that like sit up in space and they're meant to work for like 50 years. CubeSats are really cheap to build. You can build them very quickly. They're pretty robust, like, again, relatively speaking. So you can do like really cool things, and you can have super high risk on these small little bread loaves that you just can't see on, hold on, my computer's dying. On like these large emissions, right? So we're more willing to accept risk. Like there's a whole process of risk mitigation analysis, and sometimes with CubeSats, you just have to be like, well, you know, that's definitely something that could fail, but like, you know, like we're risk because the science and the output of our mission objective is so cool that we're like willing to do it, and like we've accepted it.
Wow.
And if it does fail, we're still going to learn a lot. So I think that's like something, again, that our generation is just like really comfortable, maybe not really comfortable, but like more comfortable doing. Yeah. At least from my perspective, you know, I'm speaking from a very limited, you know, in the weeds perspective, but.
Oh yeah, and you know, none of this is legally binding. This is just people having conversations about our thoughts at a young age. And you know, the internet's not forever, right? This will never come back to haunt us.
I'm not speaking on behalf of MIT. I should just throw that out there.
Oh, true. Yeah. We're never speaking on behalf. This is just our opinions, young people space, cool stuff happens.
Right.
To quote one of our other fellows, space is super hard. And when we can send up a bunch of those different bread loaves, you know, we just have more chance of getting it right. You know, that's one of the things NASA did in the 90s. Smarter, faster, better. I might be quoting Grap, or I might be quoting NASA. I can't remember suddenly. But sending up all these missions, it does some good stuff.
Yeah, it's really exciting. One of the companies that I always point people to, obviously Millennium does small spacecraft, but the company that does more closer work to what I do at MIT is Planet Inc. They're so cool. They deploy like stop.
He's predicting this. This isn't fair. We're not that predictable.
On like yeah, they send out so many really cool CubeSats, and because they're just like rapid like these small little like things, they have so much opportunity to like innovate. So right now they have one of the best radios, I mean, to my limited perspective of what exists on the market, right? But they have like one of the best CubeSat radios in the game, just because, you know, they've been like, you know, innovating with like no remorse. Like, you know, they're just like throwing things
Innovating with no remorse. Oh, that is such a good slogan. Innovation with no remorse.
As soon as I said that, I regretted it.
I love it. That is incredible.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end of our interview today, and I kind of wanted to bring it around to the question I've been asking to everyone who comes online. And it's unfortunate because most of the time space makes us smile and laugh because it is so much fun, but we do not exist in a vacuum except the times when we literally exist in the vacuum up there. Right. But puns aside, we have to deal with space existing in a political world, in a scientific world, and in so many other areas. And commercial space really brings that to the forefront because it's not just in a research lab. You are dealing with everything else, and you're dealing with money and investors. So with that prelude, given everything that happens in the world, and especially everything that has happened this year, not that it started this year, but because people are finally becoming aware of the vastness of it this year in a way that should have happened earlier. Given all of that, how can we justify this new round of interest and time investment and money investment into space, and how can people who might not necessarily be space enthusiasts like we are see value in it themselves, or can they?
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. This especially has just like beat me up. It has not been nice, especially being you know, a Black woman in this field. Like, it's really, really hard to care about space and to be passionate about space and moments where you see people, especially online, just like policing like your existence, right? Like that's so, it's so difficult to care about your career, to care about your career objectives, to care about your progress in like day-to-day activities when folks are just constantly trying to like keep you down, right? Like that, I'm not going to get emotional, but that is like something that's really incredibly painful and like really difficult to work through. So yeah, no, this question like really resonates with me because sometimes it's hard. It's hard to remember that space matters, and that space should be a priority, especially when things on the ground are so difficult and so messed up and just so like, I didn't even know, like words are escaping me. But no, it's hard. I think I'm going to reiterate one of the points that I made earlier is that in sinking money and investing time into research and to understanding our planet better, especially on the front of climate change and understanding how we're able to not only like to mitigate it moving forward, but to also kind of reverse it. And then consequently in doing this research, we're bringing awareness to these things, right? Like there are always going to be people who deny science. There are always going to be people who want to argue with you, who think that they know more than people who do this thing for a living. That's inevitable. That's a part of existing in a country where folks are allowed to speak freely, honestly, and it can be a beautiful thing to have those conversations. It can be a very frustrating thing to have those conversations, especially like when talking with people where you're like, how, like you, but I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, so I think like proving to people and bringing awareness of these things and breaking it down, especially one thing that's like incredibly important to people who exist in the space industry is being able to communicate your work, to explain it in layperson's terms where you can show somebody and in words that they can understand what you're doing and why it matters. That's like such a critical component of existing in this field. And I think like having that skill is something that we should all kind of strive to do better because that inevitably helps people understand why we should be justifying space. So I think like having eyes in space, again, especially on monitoring climate change and how that's affecting communities who are again underserved, underrepresented in these large spaces, especially when it comes to like these huge companies that are kind of dictating the production of emissions and doing nothing about it. Just being able to bring awareness to that and to show people how communities are being affected. The least that we can hope is that it strikes somebody's like empathy, if nothing else, like empathetic towards people who are suffering at the hands of a few. Many are suffering at the hands of a few, and I think space really does give us that perspective to kind of realize that and realize how bad it actually is. So I think that's why we should justify it.
I think that's a really beautiful answer, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate, the blunt honesty that it has to be to answer a question like that emotionally while also keeping together. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was tough. It's fine.
I can imagine. Let me just reiterate one point. I was about to move on, but people always talk about space as the place that we go. But the Earth is part of space, and part of the space industry's job, even commercial space, is finding ways to look back and help the part of space that we exist in. Yeah. So climate change applications for space, like the ones that hopefully you'll be doing for your PhD, are just beautiful and incredible, the gems in the space industry for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to study these things, right? We should have been prioritizing taking care of our planet from the jump, but we're not. We haven't been. We're destroying it for economic welfare, and that's, I almost cussed, but it's not acceptable. It's not okay.
Yeah, not cursing when talking about climate change is tough. Right. I get that. Okay, so if people... Okay, did you have something you wanted to add, by the way?
I think, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about, so you made a comment about how science is political. And I just really wanted to reiterate that because a lot of people are like, even myself growing up, I was like, science isn't political, science is for everyone. Everybody's welcome in the field of science because it's based on fact and like, blah, 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 which is like a beautiful thing if that were true. It's not. Science is very political, especially for space where you're being dictated by other people who sign off on you. other people who can like, turn their not belong to space, whether they're worthy of that position or that opportunity to conduct that research. Science is very political. If we're not thinking about it on that front and how that's actually affecting people who exist in our field, then we should be, because it's not everybody's created equally in science. You know, like everybody's work is great. Everybody is capable of existing in these spaces and performing well in these spaces. But unfortunately, not everybody's given the opportunity to do so. And that starts honestly like in high school, with people being told that like they're not able to succeed like in their classes, or they shouldn't study something because it's not meant for them. Those conversations happen so often, and I'm gonna cuss because that's complete bullshit. Like, you know, like people who are people to like tell or to impose that thought process on someone at like, especially at like such an early age. But it happens so often in these science and STEM spaces, that we really do need to have the conversation. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, conversations, especially around diversity and race, don't belong in this space, but it really does, because it's a political topic, yes, if you want to think about it that way, but it's also just a topic on human rights, on human decency, and on making sure that people feel comfortable in spaces, especially in spaces where they're trying to do work and produce work that benefit like the entire human race on the planet, right? Like, I don't know, it's just incredibly frustrating, and something that I just really want to hone in on. Like, we should be thinking about these things. We should be talking about these things. I know that they're uncomfortable. I know that the conversations have been happening like so frequently that you're probably tired of hearing them, but like, it's something that needs to be said. So yeah, that's just.
Thank you for saying it again.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. So normally at the end of these, I like to ask a lot of people who are coming from undergrad, maybe they have experienced what you just described, or maybe they just feel disconnected from the industry, or they don't know how to break in for whatever reasons. I like to ask, what is a good way to stay up to date with space news? How do you recommend doing that? But asking that again with an addendum. How can people stay up to date on what's happening in the space industry? And how can they stay up to date on everything that you just described, on efforts to improve the aerospace industry, or to just hear the problems that exist in terms of diversity and inclusion? Where can they continue to learn more about all of this?
Honestly, the best place that I found to stay up to date on both of these topics is Twitter, like twitter.com. Honestly, like it's so I've had my Twitter for a long time. I've had it for like 9 years. It used to be like a place of pure entertainment for me. It still kind of is. But now I'm like really involved, I guess, in science Twitter, which is a whole thing. And people like tweet very honestly, like small anecdotes about their experience in their field, their experience in their lab. And it's a space where people will actually hold others accountable most of the time. Like, Twitter is it can be a lawless land. But like most of the time it's like people like pointing out things that are like, hey, like, you know, this happened and that's not okay. And like, that's really important to have, even if it's on like this digital, like social media platform, you're able to see like maybe research. There was a recent incident with like research that was, you know, not equitable. It was perhaps like, it had a goal to do one thing, but perhaps could be used to do something else that was incredibly harmful. And people were like talking about it in a very open space. And it was like a recent publication in a major journal. So we were just like, you know, collective we on Twitter. Like if you're on there, you feel that we kind of presence. Or just like talking about like recent things that are happening, and then like, you know, discussing like, is this impact good? How could this go wrong? You know, what's actually happening? Where could this go? Like all those conversations happen in a very like rapid kind of pace. So Twitter can be like incredibly overwhelming, especially if you're like new to the platform, but I honestly think it's one of the best resources that exists right now. But like doom scrolling on Twitter, where you like get to scrolling and you like have existential dread, that's a thing. So like, please be mindful of your mental health, and using social media platforms. So yeah.
Stepping away from everything and taking care of yourself is necessary if you want to come back and engage energetically again.
100%. Yeah, my mom says you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's important to take care of yourself before you can give anything else to others.
That's perfect. And what better way to end than on something a mom tells us to do? Cadence, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your stories, your thoughts. And hopefully, thank you for telling some future fellows a little bit more about what they can expect when they are part of our little space family.
Yeah, it's truly an incredible program. Please apply. Please, like, don't let imposter get in the way. Imposter syndrome is trash. It's lying to you. Like just apply.
Yes, just apply. Just join the community. Apply to our program, apply to another program. Just get your way into the space family, because if you care about this, then you have a place here.
100%. That was beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For everyone else, like we talked about earlier, applications have been open, but you still have plenty of time left. Please join us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on any social media platform of your choosing, or go to MatthewIsakowitz.org. We would be so happy to answer your questions and help you along in the process, whether that process is applying to our program or just learning more about commercial space. Thank you so much for taking the time today to listen. I cannot wait to bring you another guest next week. Bye.